Welcome to Speaking of Pets. I'm Dr. Alice Novotny-Jeroman, a board-certified veterinary dermatologist.
And I'm not. I'm Janet Novotny-King, the doctor's sister, podcast co-host, pet owner, rescuer, and lover.
We're here to provide pet owners with science-based information to help them be the best pet parents they can be.
Here's today's episode, created just for you and your pets.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today. Janet, I am so excited about meeting today's guests. Dr. Cynthia Otto and Dr. Clara Wilson are both the authors of, I'm going to read the title, Trained Dogs Can Detect the Odor of Hemangiosarcoma in Canine Blood Samples. And what all that means is they are training dogs to detect cancer in other dogs. And I love that because dogs can detect cancer in us, and I want dogs to live longer. I want to find out cancer early in dogs too, so we can do something about it. So welcome to the show, Dr. Cindy Otto and Dr. Clara Wilson. And can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you came to be doing what you're doing?
We have a Buckeye. We have a Buckeye over there. I know it.
Go Bucks!
We probably saw each other in the halls because you were 86 grad and I was 89.
I was probably there. Absolutely. OH.
I
I was not in those hallways, and I graduated in 81. I was in the business school.
Okay.
Yeah. We didn't know that existed. The vet school's all its own little island.
It is an island. It's absolutely an island. So I can start because
Sure.
I'm older. And so as you mentioned, I graduated from the Ohio State University in 1986, and I went on and I did an internship at the University of Pennsylvania. I did a residency at the University of Georgia and a PhD in veterinary physiology. I then came back to the University of Pennsylvania. I achieved my board certification in emergency and critical care, a little bit of an alternate route. And then had a research lab, worked in the emergency room, and eventually got involved in search and rescue dogs. And that one thing led to another. I deployed with our search and rescue task force that I had been a member of since about 1994. And in 2001 was that pivotal moment where we deployed to 9/11. So in 2001, I deployed with the Pennsylvania task force to Ground Zero and took care of the working dogs, the search and rescue dogs at that site. Following that, I was all in on search and rescue dogs and working dogs, and spent the next 10 years, 11 years, trying to figure out how do we develop a research training and education center to support the knowledge of that supports these dogs, to understand these dogs. And also because there was always a shortage of these dogs, how do we help address that? As part of that, I then became board certified in canine sports medicine in order to support the physical well-being of these dogs. The big research that kind of led through all of that was the American Kennel Club Canine Health Foundation funded longitudinal study of the search and rescue dogs from 9/11. I think we've published about 15 papers from the information we've collected from those amazing dogs, and it really inspired a lot of what we do. In 2012, we opened the Penn Working Dog Center as a research training education facility. We have since had over 200 dogs come into the program. I think we're close to our 200th graduate. We have a research basis because our real goal is to determine how do we help support these dogs from a research standpoint. And people like Dr. Clara Wilson, who's a postdoc in our program, has really helped push that forward. We have published over 85 papers from the Working Dog Center, sharing the knowledge that we have been accumulating. So it's an exciting program. It is so comprehensive and so unique because we bring in puppies at 8 weeks of age. They come to work 5 days a week, and then they spend evenings and weekends with foster families so that they can become socialized. They pick their own careers. They get to tell us whether they want to be a search and rescue dog, or maybe they'd prefer to be a police dog, or maybe they prefer to do just maybe some explosive detection work, or maybe be one of our research dogs to help with projects like the one that we're talking about now. So this has been my life stream, and really it's kind of my opus as well.
Wow.
I know. I'm just like, wow. That is, I mean, to be doing, first of all, to be involved with the dogs of 9/11 and all they did for us, and now to be doing what you're doing with not only detecting cancer and everything else that you're doing as far as the olfactory thing, but having dogs help each other. I love that. Well, Dr. Wilson, tell us a little about you. And I love your accent, by the way.
Yes, thank you. I did indeed come from the UK. My entry into the field is a little different because growing up, I really loved animals and I had been around service dogs. My grandfather's blind, so I'd grown up with dogs and looking at that relationship and how dogs can help us and how we can help dogs. And so I was really interested in that, but I didn't really want to be a vet. I was very interested in animal behavior and human-animal interaction. And so I was lucky enough to go into psychology and have an amazing professor who specializes in animal cognition. And as soon as I found out that that was its own field, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I want to do. And so I pursued that then into a master's of applied animal behavior and welfare, and then into my PhD. And by that point, I was really honing in on these different ways that animals can help us, but especially interested in their olfaction, because I felt like I had a pretty good sense of, seeing eye dogs and hearing dogs. But I thought there was a really underutilized world with that sense of smell that I was very interested in. And so my PhD was all about canine olfaction and applied behavior. And I was specifically looking at dogs being able to smell human psychological stress. So when humans were getting stressed, their odor profile changing. And so I was able to show that the dogs can smell that when you take samples from people in the lab, they can discriminate between those samples. So that was what my PhD work was in. And I'd been able to come over to the Penn Working Dog Center a couple of times for different internships. And I just loved it and knew I wanted to come back as soon as possible. And so once the postdoc opened up, I snapped it up because I couldn't wait to come back. So I've been here almost 4 years now doing this biomedical olfaction work, but also a lot of canine cognition, puppy development, and also some fitness, occupational health, and longevity work. So I'm really lucky to be able to dip into lots of these different research areas that Cindy set up.
Are you?
So what happens when you're at a party and someone says, "What do you do?" and you say, "I'm an olfactory veterinarian"? I mean, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
No, let me tell you.
Don't smell things.
Yeah, first of all they have to hear is veterinarian. All the adjectives in front of it makes no difference because then you get the questions. The dog had diarrhea yesterday. What can I do? Blah, blah, blah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And they're on some kind of medication.
Yeah, it's flu. But I've got a question for you too. So you don't only work with one particular breed, right? You work with a bunch of different breeds?
We have preferred breeds. And part of that is because of the history of some of these breeds. We're really interested in the genetics and what makes a good working dog. And so all dogs have the capacity to do olfactory tasks. And we know that because canine nose work, the sport, you can look at that and just every breed in the world is participating in that. And they love it. It's great for the dogs. But if we're looking for a dog that we actually want to do this as a career, we need a dog that has that motivation and the physical and mental capacity to do this repetitively. And that's really one of the challenges is to identify those dogs. So most of the dogs in our program are labs or shepherds, whether that's German shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Dutch shepherds. But we've had a few other breeds. And some of them are better suited, particularly in our environment. As I mentioned, our dogs, they come into this classroom 5 days a week. They go home. They have lots of interns and volunteers and other people interacting with them. Some dogs are not as flexible in their ability to handle the chaos. And so, that's really what we're looking at. In addition, and in our program, our dogs graduate and they leave us and they go to jobs. And so there are some breeds that are not as easy to place in jobs because of people's perceptions of those breeds. And so that's another reason that we've mostly worked with the shepherds and the labs, but we've also been most successful. We understand those dogs and we understand how they learn, we understand how they adapt. And 93% of the dogs that have entered our program have actually graduated into working careers, which is unheard of. And yeah, we're so excited. We think there's a lot of reasons for that. One being that we start so early. Another is that we don't force the dog to pursue a career that is not consistent with what their needs are. So we allow the dog to tell us, search and rescue is pretty cool, but I'm scared of heights. I'm not doing that. And so they will go into a different career, but we still find careers that are successful and productive. And I am so proud of that.
And you may have noticed that in the paper that we're talking about today, there was a real mix of breeds. And that's because the paper was a little different in that we had one dog who is from our program, Vork, who is actually Cindy's foster dog. So Vork is a black Labrador, and she is a kind of full-time research dog. But because of the scope of the project, and we had other projects going on that some of the other research dogs in our program were dedicated to, this time we actually opened it up a lot to what we call our community science program. And that is either staff or people in the community's pet dogs who are allowed to come in and try for this type of research study. Mm-hmm. So this specific study ended up having 4 community science dogs and 1 dog from our program, and that's a little bit unusual. And so there we do have this wider representation of breeds. So we had a hound mix and a kind of pit bull border collie mix. So it's a bit more variability there, and that's because the only job that these dogs are required to do is kind of confined to the laboratory, as opposed to maybe needing to go out onto rubble or into the environment. So we do see sometimes a slightly wider net for these types of olfaction-based studies, as opposed to some of the working roles like a search and rescue dog, where you may need to be a certain size or something like that to be able to do the job.
Alice, they did not mention, and I'm just going to say present company excluded right here.
Golden retrievers?
No,
I'll let them.
Retrievers.
No, I'll let both the doctors tell you about golden retrievers.
I will tell you, this one has exceptional sniffies.
Well, we have a golden in one of our current research studies, so you'll see golden retriever.
Hope you're enjoying today's Speaking of Pets podcast. Every week we feature a board-certified specialist, dermatology, me, oncology, internal medicine, orthopedic surgery, ophthalmology, dentistry, you name it. If it affects pets, we're on it.
We're here to share some really good information for pet owners, practical information that is science-based, so that you can be a pet owner and have a healthier pet.
To learn more about your pet's health, check out our other episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi everyone, I'm Larry. Some of you know me as Grandpa Larry, and I run Larry's Animal Safari on YouTube, where we share sweet and educational videos about baby gorillas, zoo animals, and the amazing teams who care for them. If you love animals of all kinds, I'd love to have you join us. You'll meet little ones like Jamila and Kayembe, learn how zoo families grow, and enjoy real moments that bring joy and curiosity to animal lovers everywhere. Just search Larry's Animal Safari on YouTube, or click the link in the show notes. New videos go up weekly, and each one supports awareness for animal care and conservation. Thanks to Speaking of Pets podcast for all they do. Now, let's get back to the show.
My question is, the dogs were, and correct me if it's wrong, correct over 70% of the time, correct? Mm-hmm. In picking up the smell of the cancer in the blood sample. What is the earliest, how can I say, were these were all confirmed hemangiosarcoma cases, except for the one, the trickster, which I had to read that 3 times.
Oh, you mean it's like a fake one?
No, they'll tell you. Would you tell Janet about that?
Sure. So the way we got our samples was from various biobanks and also a lot from the Morris Animal Foundation's Golden Retriever Lifetime Study. And one of the prerequisites for coming into our kind of sample base was that if it was a hemangiosarcoma sample, the dog had been confirmed through histopathology as having hemangiosarcoma. But one of our samples, we had over 400 in the study, but we randomly, using a number generator, pre-selected 36 to be in the actual test. And unfortunately, one of our hemangiosarcoma samples that we'd selected for test actually, when we followed it up, wasn't confirmed in the way that it should have been. There was some disagreement between pathologists. So the first had said, yes, this is hemangiosarcoma, and so it came to us as hemangiosarcoma. We didn't know until we looked back at the numbers, and the dogs actually did very poorly on this one sample. They were only around 30-something% accurate. And so we followed up with the provider and said, I can't see anything in the spreadsheets to tell us that this sample is unusual, but the dogs didn't seem to think it smelt like hemangiosarcoma. And then they came back to us and said, actually, since it came to you, a second pathologist has said, no, that's not hemangiosarcoma. They sent it to a third. In the end, they decided it was too inconclusive to give it a yes or no, so they just marked it as inconclusive. But it was clearly an unusual and not a cut and dry case. And so that was very exciting because it suggests that the dogs were actually able to pick that up.
You picked up on that.
Even better than the traditional methods. And so that was an unusual one because it was kind of a mistake, but actually it was a very helpful mistake because it told us if you do have a case that is presenting like hemangiosarcoma, but maybe isn't, actually, yes, the odor compounds, they're able to tell them apart, and they were pretty sure that it wasn't. So that was a slightly unusual piece that kind of was an accident, but actually a very interesting and helpful accident.
Happy accident. Wow.
I thought that was impressive. I thought, these dogs are so good, and we're not. You know what I'm saying? As pathologists, like 3 pathologists who look at this, gosh, come to think of it, if we have something removed, I want 3-4 pathologists looking at it. You know what I'm saying?
Do you know, Alice, there is a dog named Otto in their program. And I wonder and it's a female, and I wonder who she's named after.
It's actually a male.
It's female on the
It's
website.
a male Dutch Shepherd.
Really?
Because I thought that was weird, because it says female.
We'll have to fix that.
Maybe
It's
non-binary would be more.
I don't know. I think Otto's pretty clearly male. He's got a lot of testosterone.
Because I looked at it, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
But he was named. We had a really kind donor who made a donation and was then able to name a dog, and they chose the name Otto in my honor, which was a little embarrassing, but very touching.
No, that's very special. I thought it was cute.
Now, does it make a difference in the olfactory senses if the dogs are spayed or neutered? Do you find that intact or neutered makes a difference?
So we actually can't answer that question in that we don't spay or neuter any of the dogs that are currently in the program.
Okay.
Our female dogs, once they hit about 14 months, we will spay them if they're not going to be part of a breeding program. But we definitely don't see any difference. I guess, anecdotally, the only thing that I would say is that our intact males sometimes get a little distracted. But
Party back in there.
You
You got the hormones going.
Yeah.
especially because we have intact females who are often in heat around, so it can be.
Boy, you got
They learn to work. They learn to figure it out.
They're going that way instead of smelling.
Janet, the other thing in the study, which I thought was, I'm reading this study, I'm like, yes, they had dogs that had other diseases too, that the dogs still sniffed out the cancer. I mean, I think that would be a ringer because, I'm sure a dog with diabetes smells differently than one that's hypothyroid, something along my neck of the woods in Durham, or a Cushing's dog or a Pseudomonas ear dog type thing. But I commend you for doing that because I'm sure someone would have asked you about that.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and there are still some studies out there that don't have what we would call a disease control group. But we do need to take those with a pinch of salt, because the dogs are really good at finding differences, but we can't ascribe that they have an understand. Like, I can say they're smelling cancer if I only have a cancer group and a healthy group, but they might actually just be smelling different, which could be all sorts of different things. And it may be that they're just smelling inflammation or other metabolism changes that are actually just meaning sick. And that's helpful and still interesting to know, but I then need to be very careful about not saying that they're smelling cancer. And so that's why we need that control group. And we do kind of see the dogs go through their different phases of understanding. As I show them more and more examples, they might initially alert on a diabetic dog or a dog with Cushing's, because they are using this wider spectrum of inflammation. And then the more examples you show them and you teach them over time, I'm going to reward you for alerting to this, but not this, they narrow down. And so that's kind of interesting. How narrow can we go? Because here we were just looking at hemangiosarcoma. We haven't ask these specific dogs, what about other cancer types, for example? And so, but that's kind of the process that you need to do to make sure that you're not just detecting different, but it isn't necessarily your disease of interest.
I do want to make one comment, though, is we often say, dogs, we're detecting dogs. We're actually not having dogs sniffing dogs. And the same in the human cancer. We're not having dogs sniff people. It's always samples, it's always removed, it's always in the lab. I think that's a very different process than someone going out into the community with a dog and sniffing dogs or people or whatever. For
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Look at the variables. You take a dog into someone's home. They could have other pets. They could have cats. I mean, smells galore. I'm curious okay, so we know they detect it. How then do you isolate those volatile those VOCs? I mean, I can't even imagine how you would do that.
What is in that?
My question is, do we need to do that? And so to what end are we looking for those VOCs? And so there are ways, there are ways to make this a diagnostic tool without knowing what we're actually sensing. And so there's some electronic sensors that use the same agnostic approach, but certainly our goal in working with the dogs is to identify what can we translate into a high throughput system that can use something more mechanical to do the screening, because the dogs are amazing, but it's also labor intensive. It's you think it's inexpensive because it's just a dog, but it's actually really expensive because the training that goes into it. But I'm gonna go ahead and let Clara sort of address the VOCs in more detail.
Yeah, it's kind of always the next question is what are the VOCs? And I think there's still a bit of a gap. There's this kind of perceptual gap between knowing the individual chemicals and then what perception that is giving to the dog. And we sometimes say like, I know the smell of Coca-Cola, but it's actually vanilla, lime, and, it's these specific ingredients, but just looking at those together, you're not thinking Coca-Cola because there's this perceptual gap. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, where we are able to define VOCs, and some of our current work is actually doing that right now. We're working with chemists and engineers to have the same samples that the dogs did in that published study run through a machine to say, okay, we're getting this amount of chemical A and this amount of chemical B. The hard part is then translating that into then a predictive model. And that's where the dogs are really still surpassing the technology. And there's two potential reasons. One is this perceptual gap that I've described, where just knowing X amount of these 100 different chemicals still doesn't lead you to get this overall smell in the same way that the dogs are. And the other is just that the machines still aren't picking these very low volatiles up as well as the dogs. So the chemists and the engineers know this. Like, they are very overtly open about the fact that their machines aren't able to pick up some of these ones that the dogs we know can. So there's a little bit of an issue there, and that we're missing some of the picture. But also just knowing that each ingredient still doesn't seem to necessarily translate to the ability of a machine to then say yes to this one and no to that one in the same way that the dogs are able to do. So there's a bit of a gap still, but that is kind of what we're interested in, to try and make a machine that can replicate what the dogs are doing with that level of, accuracy.
That's just amazing. Are there any short-nosed, any brachycephalic breeds? No, seriously. When I was reading this, I thought, boy, in the old movies and TV shows, you saw the bloodhounds going out, you know? And now we've got labs and golden retrievers and shepherds.
No
But
Goldens, no Goldens.
oh,
There
okay,
are golden, it's not in this specific study.
that's true. But I'm thinking of these little pugs, and I'm like, pugs, and you know, all the Frenchies that are out now. Any short-nosed breeds doing this at all, or is there a reason you couldn't use a short-nosed breed?
I don't think there's a reason that you couldn't. I know that and Dr. Otto will speak better on the veterinary side of things. My understanding from the literature is that there are some changes in the number of receptors and the number of genes that they have, but not enough to make them incapable of detecting the odor differences. I would say probably, I think there's no reason why they couldn't. I'm sure people are using brachycephalic dogs for this type of work. I haven't personally come across one or had the pleasure of working with one, but I think it's possible. The other thing that you need to think about, though, is stamina. And I think that where we may run into issues is just the stamina piece of, although it's not hugely energy taxing, they like to run in and out, and some of them like to go faster than others, and we're doing a lot of repeated trials, and you need to be able to be keeping that sniff rate very high. So I wonder if we may run into more issues with all of the extra soft tissue and the but I don't know. I think there probably are some successful brachycephalic dogs at least doing nose work and scent work. This is a little bit of an extra level up because it's not just the presence absence question, it's really low saliency discriminations. I know it was in the paper, but it's only the 100 microliters that we were using in each box is a tiny drop of blood. And so it was a really small amount of blood serum that they were seeing. And so I can't detect anything. I mean, if I were to sniff along the lineup, I'm getting absolutely nothing, let alone picking up changes between. So the dogs do need to stay, calm, don't get too overheated. We know that once they get hot and are panting too much, it can interfere with their ability to do the task. So we try and keep that to a minimum, but they love the job. So sometimes they do get a little excited and we need to take a break.
So what does the training look like for these dogs? It starts very young, right?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the foundational training, or do you want me to talk about the lab training?
Yeah, so I guess all of the dogs in our program are selected for their history of olfactory work. So they're either hunting lines or search and rescue lines, so they're already coming in with some good foundation. When they're here, they start learning about using their noses from the time they're 8 weeks old. And we use a synthetic chemical. It's called the UDC, or the Universal Detection Compound. It's 1-bromooctane. And so that is a compound that used to be used in dry cleaning, now is pretty much not anywhere in the environment. And the folks at the Florida International University developed it as almost like a calibration compound. And so the nice thing about it is that we can work with our dogs and teach them to find this smell. It's not going to interfere with any job that they do in the future, but it teaches them the mechanics of how to use their noses and how to search. All of our dogs also are trained to find live humans. And so those two things happen from the time they get here. And so those pieces are telling us, one, that the dogs in our program are using their noses. They like using their noses. And if they don't, then there may be that very small sliver of dogs that will go on to do other things, like maybe one of our golden retrievers who left the program to be more of a comfort dog or a therapy dog. Imagine, so that's where they all have that foundation. And even our community science dogs have gone through some training with this compound just to make sure they're up for the task. And then Clara and Molly and our team get really in the nitty-gritty on getting them into the very difficult task of finding these biological odors.
Yeah, so the UDC piece is, like Cindy said, teaching the mechanics. for the paradigm that we use, they need to be able to give us an alert. And the alert is a change of behavior that tells me that they're picking that individual sample. And so the paradigm that we used for the paper, we were using these odor delivery devices called olfactometers. And we also call them boxes because they look like a box. And each of those at a single time would be pumping the air from a single sample. So each one would have the drop of blood from one individual dog patient. And the nice thing about these olfactometers is that rather than me manually going in and we have one box that is the hemangiosarcoma box and I'm moving it around and the dogs might be adding their own odor to it the more they pant on it and I'm touching it and all sorts of different contaminants can happen. Instead, with the olfactometers, we have 3 in a lineup. And the computer will just switch on what valve is blowing the air. And so at a single time, one of them is presenting the hemangiosarcoma blood, the other one is a healthy dog's blood, and the one next to it is a diseased dog's blood. And then every trial, so every time the dog is released to go smell the boxes, it will have moved around without anyone having to go in and touch anything. So that's been really great for us to use that type of technology. So the alert is still present. So they would have learned how to do that with UDC. That's a much simpler question because it might be 2 empty boxes and 1 with UDC. And they just need to tell us either by sitting in front of it, but more typically standing and freezing over it, that this is the box that they're picking.
Are they like wagging their tail and getting all excited?
Yeah, we have a couple dogs that have like shaped different pieces. So we have one dog who will, you know, that they've kind of finished their alert because their tail was doing this and then it finally freezes too. But other dogs are still in the front but really excited in the back. So we have all sorts of different little spins on it, but that alert tells me which one they're picking. When we move it to blood, it's a lot harder because it's not presence absence, it's not empty hemangiosarcoma, it's, you know, healthy dog, diseased dog, hemangiosarcoma. So that's a little different, and it takes a lot of weeks of just showing them lots of examples. So you start by just showing the hemangiosarcoma and kind of clicking or doing your marker word and rewarding them as soon as they sniff it. And you build that out a little bit longer, but you quickly need to also be involving those other samples so they learn, actually, I need to discriminate between the two. But it's a really hard job for the dogs because they at some point are going to be wrong because they don't know this category yet. We're now adding in category formation. And so that's where I think it's a really interesting but unique job for the dogs, very different from some of our other scent domains where it's more of a kind of, is this my target odor or not? Here, I don't even know what about the hemangiosarcoma is their target. I just have to keep showing them examples and saying, yes, it's this, no, it's not that. But every week I'm showing them a new dog, so they can't cling on to their memory of what they saw last week. So it's a very interesting task because it's mixing that discrimination, but also this category formation where they're having to learn this general odor that I can't perceive myself. So it does take a while.
What made you decide hemangiosarcoma and not something like osteosarcoma or even lymphoma?
I have a doctor question. Have you ever created letters to say that word instead of having to say hemangiosarcoma?
When we write,
Like HMS or something. I don't know. I'm making it up.
It's actually the initials we use are HSA, and autocorrect invariably turns it into HAS.
Over has. Oh my God. Because every time you guys are saying it, I'm like,
Yeah, HSA for sure.
We also call it hemangio for short.
There you go.
So the reason that we chose hemangio, that this is
I'm
actually,
glad you did. I'm just asking. Yeah.
it's no, there's a method to our madness. We started in our cancer detection with human ovarian cancer, and human ovarian cancer is a silent killer. There is no diagnostic test for it, and if it's diagnosed late, the prognosis is really, really grim. Hemangio, is the same in our dogs, and part of it that really kind of clinched it for us, because we'd been talking about it for a while, is that it is the #1 cardiovascular cancer, particularly of working dogs. So in our study of the 9/11 dogs, of the dogs that developed cancer, whether they went to 9/11 or not, hemangiosarcoma was universally most common. The breeds that we tend to use for working dogs, Labradors, German Shepherds, Golden Retrievers, they are all very high risk for hemangio. And we have lost several of the dogs in our program, as well as several of the companion, the partners of our working dog handlers historically have been through this. Having worked in the emergency room for the first 20 years of my career, the devastation of having a dog that was fine 2 hours ago and collapsed, and now you give them this really horrible prognosis, there's just a whole lot of need. It's definitely a silent killer. It definitely it ticked all the boxes of, if we're gonna do this, this is the one that we're gonna tackle first.
I lost my first dog to hemangiosarcoma. I had another career. I wasn't a veterinarian then. And so, whenever something happens to your first dog, you always follow that disease the rest of your life. And to be honest, I don't see that we've made that many strides in diagnosing it or treating it. And that's why I was so excited when I read your paper, because I thought, boy, if there was something we could do to pick that up early, it would be a godsend.
Wow.
Janet, I was walking down to the mailbox with Muncho. This was my first dog.
Yeah.
And we're walking, and he just falls over.
Short for Munchkin, because he was like this big, but
He was
then
the hound mix, yeah, from New Jersey. And he just fell over, and I went, oh my God, he's dead. And after 20 seconds, he stood back up. And I had just gotten into vet school, and of course I did everything I was told. We had the surgery, blah, blah. And I have to tell you, 3 months after the surgery, the cutaneous lesions, he was peppered with them. And it was not good. Yeah, it was.
Is that what my Shaggy had?
Yours had a mast cell tumor on the digit.
And let me tell you, as a non-veterinarian, those, whatever they're called, just started popping up. It was like you couldn't stop it. It was so tragic.
Yeah.
It was, and he was what, 10? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm just curious, do they ever have a bad day? And if you guys aren't feeling well, do they kind of
Sense it?
come around you like, what's wrong? What's going on with you today? Did you ever
Yes.
notice that?
Yeah, so actually it was funny because all of my PhD work was on smelling psychological stress and proving that dogs could smell it. And so we do notice there's almost like a test effect where, because we have community science owners, so the dog's actual owner will come into the room and give the dog the treats and be part of the process, but we're all blinded, obviously, so we don't know where the sample is or which one's right. But on test days, the dog's performance would sometimes drop, even though nothing else had changed. We'd gotten them used to blinded testing. So we're beginning to mess around with not even really telling the owners that it was a test. Because I do think that, and it's maybe our body language, I can't say that it's for sure just the olfaction signals, but maybe we're nervous, but I do think the dogs kind of pick up when it's like, this one's really important versus just a normal training session, everyone's relaxed. So we have tried to kind of minimize the difference between a training and a test session so that the dogs don't kind of pick up on these differences and feel different. And then in terms of having a bad day, they definitely do, which is why I think we would love to be able to move to kind of an automated test for the scale up. For now, it's still like they're the gold standard. And so we've got to keep working with them until we can figure out how they're doing it. But they do sometimes have off days. Either it precedes them, like maybe they're not feeling very well. If there's any kind of respiratory thing that they have going on, we know that really impacts olfaction. Sometimes if there was one of our dogs we found out later had kind of a bad back, which now we manage. But when that was bothering him, he may not make it's like me being asked to do a really complicated math exam when I have a really bad headache. I might not be able to do it to the best of my capacity. So we do see some variability, but usually it's kind of points in time. As the training's going, we see a certain standard. And then if the dog's not meeting that standard, we think, let's see what's going on today. And then usually we can figure out why. So usually it is kind of tied to some of these health things or that kind of stuff. Do you want to talk about with Paola, or do you want me to talk?
What is the future hold?
So our next step is we're working with chemists and engineers down at Texas Tech University who are just amazing. And they've been running the samples that we used in the published study through their machines. So these are kind of gas chromatography and those types of machines to pull out what's in each sample. And that's been really exciting to begin to get a picture of what possibly the dogs could be picking up on. Like I said, just knowing the list doesn't necessarily give you the perceptual piece, but it's a step forward. So that would be kind of the blueprint of defining which chemicals may be the kind of hemangiosarcoma signature. The keyword there is signature, because it's not unfortunately going to be just one or two. It's going to be the way that they talk to each other in combination. But still, this is the kind of best way if you want to look at specific chemicals to move forward. Once that's been established, they're working on creating something called a mimic or a pseudo odor, and that means that they're going to try and replicate what we found and create a kind of soup or a magic potion. We're then going to give that back to the dogs who are proficient on the real smell and see whether we can get anything that's close enough that when they see it, they say, yes, this is what I'm used to detecting as hemangiosarcoma. So that's a kind of interesting way to still be using dogs as the gold standard, but help answer some of these questions on what is closest to their experience. And if we can find one that's pretty close, that might then be the framework for a blood test or a urine I mean, we're doing blood right now, but it could really be any substrate, where if you get these chemicals in this kind of a signature, let's flag this dog for further testing. Because again, we might not be using this as a be-all end-all diagnosis, but people don't have the funds nor the inclination to put every dog through scans every year. That would be incredibly expensive and a waste of resources. But if you got a match on this, very quick test, maybe then you would want to go and do further screening, and that could really help people catch it earlier than they're catching it right now.
How do you know when a dog has reached their limit? They need to retire, so to speak.
Oh.
Yeah, we've had a couple of our dogs, and I think especially with so in our medical detection, because it's cognitively taxing. It's a lot of hard work. And so a lot of our dogs, after 5 or 6 years, they just stop having fun doing it.
Yeah.
And so their performance kind of goes down, and we're like, guess what? You have contributed so much. You now can go and lay on the couch for the rest of your life. So I think that's...
We sometimes have dogs where because this stuff is very complex, but then we have our UDC as kind of the most easy version, but we could also do easier versions of just the hemangio in the lineup and then 2 empty boxes. We have those kind of checks and balances. And if a dog who used to be very proficient is now not reliably giving us the answer on some of those easier questions, that's a really good tell that for whatever reason, they're not kind of interested in participating anymore. One of the dogs in our current study who was in the published paper is about to turn 13, and she's still incredibly up for it and just loves it and is showing us great performance. And so we know that as dogs age, kind of their olfactory system does begin to decline. They're going to lose some of those receptors, but she's still very proficient. So it's very interesting to see. But then, like I said, at a certain point, we might see that decline, but we can't predict the age that it's going to happen because it seems to be very independent.
Good at her job.
Yeah, she loves it.
Aging gracefully.
Now, they're not allowed to be on any medications, right?
Oh, gosh.
Because don't some medications interfere with your olfactory abilities?
So that's not allowed to be on any medications is probably an overstatement.
Okay.
Because what we find is if a dog has arthritic pain,
Right.
then putting them on pain meds actually improves their performance.
Makes sense.
And there are some drugs that do interfere with olfaction, but there's not a lot that we have evidence that truly do impair olfaction. So certainly all of our dogs are on monthly preventatives, and
Right.
that hasn't been an issue. We've had dogs that have been on gabapentin and trazodone because we need to have them resting quietly if they have an injury, but it doesn't seem to necessarily impair their olfaction. That one we haven't tested systematically. There are a few things that we have tested systematically. So what we will do, and this would even be true of veterinarians that are out there prescribing medication for working dogs. I mean, anything that we prescribe could have the potential to impact it. There is a study on metronidazole,
Right.
but it's at doses that I don't use. So 25 milligrams per kilogram twice a day, which is getting real close to the neurotoxic dose. Has been shown to decrease the sensitivity of the dog's nose in some of the dogs tested. But even, it's just there's lots of things out there. What we would recommend is if we're doing anything, even an anesthesia or some surgical procedure, if that is a drug detection dog, especially a bomb detection dog, we don't want to interfere with any of their sensitivity. Have the handlers do a test with the dog with their training aid to make sure the dog is performing at the expected level. At this point, that's our best bet. If all of the dogs were trained on this universal detection compound, the UDC, then they could calibrate their dog before they went out. But unfortunately, that's not a widely available process. So we just have to evaluate the dog, make sure that anything we do as veterinarians doesn't impair their performance, and really have that conversation with the handlers, because we know just even sometimes the emotional stress of being in the veterinary hospital, the dog might not be on their game for 24 hours or more.
Wow. So, Dr. Otto, did you work with the famous 9/11 dog Brittany?
Yes, I love Brittany.
The
Yes.
golden.
She's a golden, and the last of the 9/11 dogs that in our study. She was I think she was 16. She had her sweet 16th birthday up in New York. And she was a fabulous dog. We had one of the first puppies in our program was named after her, and it was a golden. And that golden was a successful diabetes alert dog. That was one of very few diabetes alert dogs that we trained.
She's famous in New York, like we also have the famous pale male, the hawk.
Oh,
I live outside and it's very famous. And actually now pale male's former girlfriend has a partner and is back in the nest, like on Park Avenue. So that was in the news this week. I know it's kind of a groupie thing here, but Brittany was also like a famous New Yorker, so to speak. So it's
I
really
love the
sweet.
name.
Brittany,
yeah, it's spelled Britannia. But yeah.
yeah.
Well, we need to know what pets you guys have.
But we want to know.
Do you want to talk about Volk?
Well, yeah. We can, so Vok is my foster dog. She's a black lab. She's one of the dogs in the study. She's 5 years old now. I'm surprised that's not her barking in the background.
We're used to
very high energy, but she's a fabulous dog, and she actually has a strong preference for my husband, or maybe they have a strong preference for each other because they, but they're lovely. They're absolutely lovely, and so she is currently my only pet. That said, I do have a very special relationship with a wild black vulture that comes and visits me.
Cool.
And we interact, and I've actually trained him to do some agility, which is really silly.
Like at home? There's a
At home, in my back, yeah. I live on several acres, and so
That's so
he comes and
cool.
visits.
I live in a little town in Ohio where the buzzards come back every year, Hinckley, Ohio. But I've yet to train one.
Yeah.
I don't
They're
think
very
I've ever
smart. They're very smart, and they very much enjoy the interaction, which is interesting. I would have never known.
At OSU, when I was in Raptor Rehab, we had a couple vultures in, and they just kind of plod around, and we get in there in that bottom cage. I enjoyed working with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're fascinating.
But
Absolutely.
Dr. Wilson, do you have any pets?
I do. So, I'm like I said, I'm about 4 years into my time in America. Back home, I have a dog with my parents, who's a red fox Labrador. He actually was kind of a washout from a biodetection program back in the UK for environmental sensitivities, but he's a very lovely pet dog. He just said no, thank you to being a service dog, which was fair enough. He's a little nervous. So he's back at home with my parents. He's now kind of primarily my parents' dog. Here, I work with a lot of dogs because outside of the postdoc, where we were also dogs all day, I work as a certified applied animal behaviorist. So I'm kind of with client dogs throughout the week. So across all that and thinking, maybe I'll go back to the UK one day, I've decided no personal dogs while I'm here, but I do have a cat. And I've trained him to do the fitness program that we do here. I've trained him to do nose work. I walk him outside on a leash. So I've kind of made him into a dog. But it's easier with a cat to leave, whilst you're so busy during the day. But dogs are definitely in my future.
Well, and Dr. Otto, I have a male cat that literally does this to me and loves my husband and 2 sons. So figure that one out.
It's their smell.
Yeah.
He runs up to me if he wants to go outside because I have a hand to open the door. Other than that, he's like, get away.
But speaking of cats, and I know we've got to wrap it up, but remember the story a few years ago about the cat that lived in the nursing home and would go and sit in front of one of the doors of one of the residents who wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That'll be the next project. Good luck with that one with cats.
Yeah, I was going to say cats are very capable. They're just not always willing.
They don't want to, right? It's always their day off.
Wait, and this one here, the high energy golden right there, when you're saying exercise program, she's going. No, she's usually very active. We had a baby bunny this morning that the cat got.
Oh,
It was
damn
on
it.
the bed, and she was with the cat, the female cat, who's fabulous. And then the dog took the bunny, and I'm like, well, you're not coming back in the house with that. And she didn't do anything with it. She just,
Okay. Okay.
and then Donald took care of that. But anyway, so we have our guest question.
Okay.
So let's start with Dr. Wilson. What is your pet or human peeve?
Probably still dominance theory and people who don't always understand that when dogs are doing something, it is working for them in some way rather than them being naughty or trying to annoy you. I think people ascribing dogs as being stubborn or doing something to annoy the owner, that bugs me because I just think that's a strange way to look at your own animal.
This one's saying, listen in. And Dr. Otto, what is your pet or human peeve?
My pet peeve is probably obesity in our canines because we know that it shortens their lives. It's not food is not love. And so, especially as a sports medicine veterinarian, keeping our dogs moving and keeping them physically fit is absolutely front and center.
Yeah, they don't open the refrigerator door. We're the ones that open it,
Or the
right?
treat jar.
Or the treat jar. Janet, when we're off camera, I got to read to you the list of treats that they used in the study.
Oh, well,
I
Alice,
love that.
I actually use the kibble bits.
Yeah, I
because
do
they're
too.
small.
Yeah.
I figure they have nutrition. I mean, you taught me that, although we do have some special, treats.
Yeah.
On occasion.
Well, I'll make one comment about kibble, and I use it all the time.
Okay.
But we have had puppies in particular. We had one puppy choke on a piece of kibble. We almost lost it. So it's really important when our puppies, because they kind of look up and our hips are high, and it goes right down the wrong pipe. And that puppy ended up in the ICU for almost a week, and we're just so lucky to have him come back to the program and then go on to be a search and rescue dog. But I always, when we're giving, especially the puppies, and they're eager and they're reaching up, thinking about the way we deliver those treats is really important. A lot of times we'll just drop them on the ground and let them pick them up off the ground because it's
I
safer.
never thought of that.
They're golfing. They're so excited, right?
Yeah. Oh, God.
This has been just absolutely fascinating. Appreciate the
I
work
love it.
you all are doing. It's amazing. It's a big wow. So thank you so much for tuning in with us today and being our guest. And Alice, what did you want to say?
Oh, I'm in awe because I think dogs helping other dogs, there's nothing better than that. You know, we're fixated on dogs helping humans, but they do so much for us. I'm so glad that I'm just so honored to meet you both. I was so looking forward to this.
It's fascinating. Fascinating. Thank you so much. So we're going to say goodbye for today. Don't forget to tune in, listen, share. And Alice, what about our website?
Oh yeah, don't forget if you have any comments, questions, or even leave us a message, soppodcast.com. Speaking
We'd
of
love
Pets
to hear from you.
Podcast.
Thanks
Got
for
it.
tuning in.
Hey, thanks for watching.
And listening.
We like likes.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow us on social media at Speaking of Pets.
And give your pets a big kiss from the Novotny sisters.
The Speaking of Pets podcast is an SLA Video Production.